Hello, namaste, and good afternoon. This is Manashwi, and on behalf of our Optum IBITS team, I would like to welcome you all to our IBITS e-learning session organized by Optum. First, a brief introduction about our program. The IBITS e-learning session is an initiative by Optum, and it is an interactive program where we discuss optometric topics. And today, we have Mr. Hamza Qureshi, who is going to talk to us about workup of a contact lens patient. Before we start, a brief introduction about our speaker. Mr. Hamza Qureshi is the head of department in Aditya Jyoti Institute of Optometry, Mumbai. He is currently pursuing his Maastricht University, Netherlands. Mr. Qureshi did his both bachelor's and master's in optometry from ITM University, Raipur, and also holds a bachelor in science from Mumbai University. He is an IACL member and faculty member for Johnson & Johnson. He has also reviewed different contact lenses products from Johnson & Johnson's, Alcon, and Bausch & Lomb. So on behalf of for Optum IBITS team and our audience, we welcome you, sir.
Thank you, Manasvi, for such a sweet introduction. So, I welcome all of you to this wonderful session organized by For Optum. And good afternoon, everyone. So, let's, without further delay, begin with our presentation. So, my topic for today is practical guide to contact lens workup. So, before we begin, I just have some disclosures. I have no financial interest or I endorse any kind of product or represent any organization for this particular presentation. All brand products that you see in my presentation are purely for educational purpose. Please really discuss and contribute. I would like to acknowledge contributors and my friends who have given consent to use their images for this presentation. And a big thank you for Optum team to giving me such a wonderful platform to speak on. So preliminary workup of a contact lens patient. The most important aspect in any workup is a history taking, be it low vision assessment, be it binocular vision workup, or be it a contact lens. If you have a very detailed history, most of your job is done over there. The reasons for history is to possibly preliminary workup of a contact lens patient. The most important aspect in any workup is history taking, be it low vision, be it binocular vision workup, or be it a contact lens workup. If you take a wonderful history, a detailed history, most of your job is done. So all you have to do is sit back and do your technique stuff and give satisfaction to your patients. History taking is of utmost priority when you are doing a contact lens workup. So the outcomes of history is to understand possible reasons why does a patient wish to wear contact lenses. Patient reasons could be peer pressure, could be occupational needs, could be relatives, weddings, sports, it could be recommendations from friends. So reasons for patient to wear a contact lens could be anything. It is you who has to decide whether the patient is indicated or contraindicated for contact lens. It means whether your patient who has come to you for a contact lens is suitable to wear a contact lens or they should continue with their spectacles. So by and large, anyone who can wear or fit or is deemed fit by an optometrist to wear contact lens is considered a contact lens patient. So you have to investigate the criteria in order to get successful contact lens fitting. When a patient comes to you, you have to understand their requirement. You need to dig deep, ask open-ended questions, make a familiar background with them, so that you build a good rapport and they open up with you and you get in all the details, which will give you a broader prospect as to why your patient wants contact lenses. And then you can accordingly, at the back of your mind, start thinking about probable varieties of contact lenses that are available, which you can advise to this particular patient. You also have to consider the prescription range, type, usage, and the most important, product availability for that particular patient. If the patient is not suited for contact lens, during the history, if you consider that the patient is not indicated, please politely tell the patient and ask them to continue with spectacles. So, when you are taking a history, you need to understand the psychological aspect of the patient as well. When I say psychological aspect, it includes motivation, intelligence, and personality of the patient. If a patient is highly motivated and has high intellect ability, the success rate of your contact lens will go on. So it is definitely going to influence the success of your contact lens fit. Okay. So do make a note of intelligence level and how motivated your patient is. So when you're taking history, your workup has already started. So you need to, if the patient you feel is little demotivated or nervous, you need to reassure your patient. You need to build up his motivation so that it will eventually play a bigger role in your successful contact lens fit. For example, a patient who expresses extreme sensitivity may be suggestive of a potentially unsuccessful contact lens wearer. So you need to highlight all these things when you take history. Once you have once you have got a detailed history, you have highlighted indications and contraindication, and you have set your mind that you have shortlisted several products for your particular patient in your mind. So you don't have to open up at that point of time. You have to keep it at the back of your mind so that once you progress with the workup, you will be able to shortlist the product and give the best suited product for your particular patient. Once your history is done, you have to go ahead with refraction. Let me tell you, a good refraction is of utmost priority. If you do a very wonderful job with refraction, you will not have difficulties with contact lens patients. So, in refraction, you have to do your objective and subjective refraction to establish best corrected visual acuity. Uh, People in optical outlets, they can be in a tight situation when teenagers or young adults come, whether to give a cycloplegic refraction or not. So what I suggest is eliminate the need of a cycloplegic refraction by doing a fogging technique. Once you have done your wonderful refraction, you need to ensure there is no underlying binocular vision problem. Binocular vision problem and contact lens go hand in hand. If there is a binocular vision problem which you have overlooked, definitely it is going to end up in poor outcomes. So you have to ensure that there is no binocular problem. You can do a binocular balancing after your refraction. You can just briefly check the binocular vision status. Once you have got refraction, you will have to calculate back vertex power. Now, what is back vertex power? So basically, back vertex distance is something, as you all know, spectacles are worn further away from the eye, and contact lens rests directly on the cornea. The distance between the front surface of cornea and back surface of your spectacle is called back vertex distance. So with this distance, physics and maths come in play. So a dioptric power which we have given in a spectacle cannot be seen to a contact lens wearer. Because of this we have to use this particular formula. It is a very simple formula. A focal length of contact lens is equal to focal length of spectacle divided by 1 minus d, that is your back vertex distance, into focal length of spectacle. It is very simple. I'll just take one small example so that you become very familiar with this formula. One important aspect is you should understand each patient has different occupation and they have different needs. So the underlying reason of history is also to establish a strong relationship between their occupation, their their occupation, their leisure time, what they do in their hobbies, and establish their needs accordingly. So we'll just take a example of back vertex distance calculation before we move on. So consider this a spectacle wearer with minus 3.5 diopter sphere at a vertex distance of 12 mm. So what you have to do is simply Rx, that is 3.75. You have to divide it with 1 minus. Now this is 0.01. A lot of people will say from where this 0.012 came in picture. That is simply a dioptric conversion of. So when we have to do dioptric conversion, we have to use meters. So 1000 mm is equal to 1 meter. So if you divide 12 by 1000, you get 0.012. If you don't have to remember, the simple thing is you have to remember this particular aspect. that is spectacle Rx, whatever the spectacle Rx that we have found out, divided by 1 minus 0.012. You can keep this 0.0 constant, and whatever your vertex distance is that you're working at, be it 12 mm, 13 mm, 14 mm, you can just replace the last two digits multiplied by your spectacle Rx. So in this case, we have minus 0.75 sphere divided by 1 minus 0.012 into minus 3.75. The final outcome is minus 3.50 diopters. Now a question over here arises. You might have seen a lot of back vertex distance calculations, and generally a lot of manufacturers, they advise, they suggest that back vertex distancing should be done on prescriptions above plus minus 4. So let me tell you, if you go theoretically, your back vertex distance calculation starts from 3.50 onwards. Manufacturers, they have their certain guidelines which we have to abide by, or which we have to consider while fitting a particular lens. Supposingly, if you are fitting product A of a manufacturer, so you have to look at their fitting guidelines. The reason why there is a change in back vertex calculation, the reason why there is a vertex calculation is because the lens material, the optics of the material, the design, the peripheral junction thickness, everything comes in play, which can alter the power. So that is why you need to stick with the manufacturer when you are calculating. A lot of manufacturers above, they stick with the notion that plus minus 4 should be considered as standard, and back vertex calculation should be done plus minus 4. And now for those customized lenses where there are no guide for them, we can consider 3.5 and 3.75 spectacle prescription. So what does this mean? This means if a person who has a spectacle error of minus 4 diopter will be contact lens of minus 3.75. Okay, moving on. Once you have your detailed history, you have done a wonderful job. Your history, accurate refraction. There is no binocular vision problem. You have calculated the back vertex power. You have got your contact lens power. What else do you need? You need to have base curve, and base curve will come to know from keratometry. In our time, we used to have something called as modern keratometers, which are almost obsolete now. So this is the image of Bausch & Lomb one position keratometer, which we used to call times, but now I hardly see these keratometers as they are going. Modern technology has evolved a lot, and now we have advanced topographers, keratometers, keratometers, which are inbuilt, and within one detailed corneal profile. They paint a beautiful picture of cornea, giving all the high points, low points of your cornea, wherein you can fit your contact lens. So I would say these advanced diagnostic instruments, they have made our life very easy. So now those who have still, those who have those traditional one position keratometers, for them we used to have extended and regular keratometry. Basically it is just the range because of which there is a division. So the regular keratometry range lies from 36 diopters to 52 diopters. Expand the range, what we used to do is we used to plus 1.5, 1.25 diopters in front of the eyepiece, and it will increase the range by 9 diopters. For example, if the reading dial is 49 diopters, and if you put plus 1.25, you'll get the actual reading would be plus 58 diopters. Similarly, on a lower side, if you put negative 1 lens, your will shift to minus 6 diopters. Okay, now this is very important. We need to understand that every contact lens comes with their fitting guide. It would be a difficult question as to what should I select for a base curve. So what I suggest is to look at your manufacturer guideline. Unless and until you hear a picture, you cannot move ahead. So if you don't have guidelines, ask for the fitting guidelines, and believe me, manufacturers, these contact lens companies, they willingly provide more than enough. So you just have to ask them, ring in their sales team or their sales team, and they'll happily give you their. So why the reason for these guides is some products of same brand, they have multiple base curves and diameters available. So it would be a tacky situation to understand as to what base you should choose. Supposingly, if a product has two base curves, you will be stuck up over there. What to do? Generally, all these manufacturer guidelines they follow a binotion, a rule. They add 0.6 mm to 1 mm based on their recommendation. So whatever you get in your keratometry, supposingly you are getting 7.80, so you can add somewhere between 0.6 to minus 1 mm based on the recommendation of your manufacturer. This will vary from product to product, so you need to ask for fitting guidelines. Just for example, see this. This is Johnson & Johnson suggested base curve for spherical contact lenses. If you look, they have two varying base curves and varying diameters. So what do they suggest? If a patient whose keratometry readings are less than 7.0 for AccuView Vita, you must go with 8.4 base curve. And if it is more than 8.10, if the keratometry reading is 8.10, you should consider fitting 8.80 base curve. So that is what I want to emphasize again on this part, that without manufacturer guidelines, without manufacturer fitting logs, you should not proceed. You should always ask for the manufacturer guidelines. Every company has their own set of guidelines depending upon their design. They have incorporated the peripheral junction thickness, how does their lay with the eye. So depending upon that, it all changes. So you need to understand guidelines before you begin. So now you have a detailed history, you have a wonderful refraction, you have your contact lens power, you have your base curve. What else is needed to fit a contact lens? You need to have horizontal visible iris diameter, that is your HVID. If you can see, okay, the slide is okay. So if you can see this image, the dotted red line indicates horizontal visible iris diameter. For a soft contact lens, you need to understand that you have to add plus 2 mm to your HVIDs. Generally, it ranges from 14.00 to 14.5 in soft contact lenses. For RGP, since the RGP lens lies within the corneal zone, you have to subtract minus 2 mm from your HVID. Palpable fissure height is another essential measurement which you need to consider while fitting a contact lens. Large palpable fissure height can lead to problems like incomplete closure of lids, or blink completeness could be an issue. The other aspect which you have to look is the lid position and lid tonus. If the lid is too tight while blinking, it can cause mechanical disruptions under the lid. Again, so you need to consider a smaller diameter lens relatively rather than going for a large dia lens. Now the important point over here is corneal size and pupil size. You need to measure pupil size because the pupil size will, the optic design and pupil size goes hand in hand. If the optic zone of your manufacturer is not matching with the pupil size, the patient will end up terribly with halos and glare and will ultimately become a dropout, which we don't want in first place. So a lot of people say, a lot of manufacturers, they don't disclose their optic zone. So we have no option over there. But what we can do is, while placing our orders, which we'll see in the later slides, we can always mention our pupil size so that the manufacturer is well aware whether the contact is suitable for your patient or not. And then they can guide you over. So now, just a quick recap. We have history, we have a good refraction, we have wonderful contact lens power, which we have calculated. We have the base curve, we have the diameter in play. The most important aspect of contact lens fitting is the eye health status. So how do we come to know what is the status of the patient's eye? Basically, we will do a slit lamp examination. So slit lamp examination is essential, and you have to follow in order. It should not be in random. As I have listed, tiers I have listed separately for the reason that if you are doing a lid, conjunctiva, cornea over a period of time, the tiers we may get false reading for tiers. So what I suggest is you can first go ahead with the tier assessment, and then later on follow check on lid, lashes, conjunctiva, cornea, the interior chamber angles, iris, and crystalline lens. For a slit lamp examination, when you are doing a slit lamp examination, you need to understand that you don't have to go fast. You just have to go. Remember, small steps leads to bigger achievement. If you jump on anything, if you jump on, it would be difficult for you to rule out possible underlying pathologies. So what you have to do is just follow the trend. And remember, you don't have to go fast. Just go slow. You just have to go at your own comfortable pace. Make sure you document everything, whatever your clinical findings are. It will be very easier for you. So we just saw a brief idea about slit lamp examinations. We will be taking each one of them step by step. So when I ask my students that you have to understand everything, you have to go in deep, you have to study. This is how you can see the image. This is how. So when we talk about tears, we need to have a detailed idea about basic anatomy and physiology. Then the tear test involved and what are the possible dry eye diseases. See, basically you'll be able to diagnose an abnormal condition when you know what is normal. It is very difficult for anybody to come to a conclusion without knowing what is normal, what is abnormal. So to understand what is abnormal, you first need to study what is normal. So that is why you need to have a complete idea about the anatomy and physiology of tears. What is the layer formation pattern? Which layer arrives from where? How many layers are present? What is the content? What is the volume and flow rate? So once you have a detailed idea about the basics, what is normal, then you will be able to quickly grasp and you will be able to quickly identify what is abnormal with your patient. But if you have not done your homework well, if you have not studied well what is normal, you will never be able to do a successful contact lens fitting. So when you do tear test, there are numerous tear tests. You cannot apply to your patient. The patients will run away. So what you have to do is you have to understand and study them first. Whether you have to use a qualitative test or a quantitative test, whether the test that you are going to perform on your patient is suitable for the given condition of the patient. What are the accuracy parameters, how accurate my test is, how reliable my test is, and whether you are documenting. You need to document every single thing that you do with your patient. Along with this, you also need to have a complete picture of commonly occurring dry eye diseases, which you can correlate with your patient and you can come to a conclusive diagnosis. Without having a background knowledge of what is going around, it would be very difficult for you to counsel your patient. So what I suggest all of you is you basically can enlist commonly occurring dry eye diseases in a tabular format. First column you write the name of the disease. Second, you can write the grading or treatment options, and third, reference, which condition has to be referred. Now suppose a patient comes to your clinic and you have in history you come to know the patient has arthritis. So it should click your mind, arthritis is closely related to dry eye conditions. While checking on slit lamp, you also need to keep that in mind. Arthritis, okay, whom should I refer for arthritis? If the patient is not taking care for arthritis, definitely it will end up with complications in contact lenses as well. So you need to counsel your patient then and there. Sir, this is your primary problem. It has nothing to do with your eyes. Even if I fit a contact lens and if you don't take good care of your arthritis, definitely you will feel itchy and dry eye. So that is how you have to approach your patient. So what you can do over here is start preparing list of commonly occurring diseases. Keep it in handy in your practice, in your clinics. Whenever you come across, just quickly look at it, and by the time you will memorize them over a period of practice. Now, what are the common tear tests? We'll just quickly see some commonly occurring tear tests. So I have classified them into two groups: invasive test and non-invasive test. So your breakup time, your Schomers 1 and 2, phenol-red test, these are all invasive tests. Anything, uh, any test in which we are doing something to the cornea or to the eye is called as invasive. And your non-invasive test includes NIBUT, tear thinning time, tear prism height. Lipid layer test, basically they are done using an instrument called tearoscope. So you have to just observe under tearoscope. Now you have to understand which test to apply when. If you're dealing with a very sensitive patient, I would consider you go for an NIBUT, non-invasive ear breakup time, as it is more sensitive than your regular breakup time. So this all will come with your practice and understanding, and the basic golden rule is you have to study, 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 look up for references and study. Without detailed background knowledge, it becomes difficult to fit a successful contact lens. You will be able to fit contact lenses, but chances of dropouts and chances of becoming a successful practitioner will decline. So you need to have basic background knowledge. You must thoroughly be very thorough with your background knowledge, at least with the basics. Once you are sure with the basics, you can master any kind of advanced treatment. So when you're talking about tear tests, we need to mention these dyes, uh, fluorescent, sodium fluorescent strips, glycerin green. These are the two commonly occurring dyes which are used widely for contact lens assessment. Rose Bengal is obsolete and is not available. These probable reasons, there are major complications and more number of complications than its benefits. So people are not using Rose Bengal anyway, but fluorescein and glycerin is commonly and widely in practice. Okay, so now we have seen the tear test. Now we'll just quickly go through what all you have to look under slit lamp. So the first thing after tears, you have to check for lashes. Uh, any If there is any misdirection in lashes, the surface of lash, if there is any blepharitis, and then you have to follow by lid. You have to invert the lid and check for papillae, concretion, follicles. You have to check if there is any mechanical disturbance beneath the lid. You have to check for any inflammation in the lid. Once you are done with lid and lash, you move to conjunctiva. You have to check for any growths like pinguicula or pterygium. Then you have to check for edema if there is any kind of swelling. You also have to go through the limbus, whether the limbus is well defined. Lid and conjunctiva, they go hand in hand. If you see beneath the lid, that is your palpable conjunctiva. So you have to assess them simultaneously, and then you can move to your cornea. So in cornea, you need to basically see the transparency of cornea, how transparent the cornea is, if there is any opacification, if there is any kind of ectasia present, if there is any keratitis. So now, if you remember, we mentioned in essential measurements, we have measured palpable fissure height. So palpable fissure height, basically, if it is incomplete, it can lead, if the patient has large palpable fissure height, it can lead to incomplete closure of lid, which can ultimately lead to some kind of keratitis. So you need to be well aware about that. You can link with that thing. Once you are done with your corneal assessment, you can have to look at the anterior chamber angle. Many a times you can pick up glaucoma cup just looking at the anterior chamber angle. So you need to have a detailed examination of the anterior chamber. Check for any cells and flares. Cells and flare in anterior chamber will reflect that there is an active infection. So you cannot fit a contact lens in active infection. You need to first treat the underlying pathology, underlying cause, and then you can, once the cornea is normal, once the eye is healthy, you can start with the contact lens. You have to check whether there is blood or whether there is pus in the anterior chamber, which will indicate active infection. Once you are done with the anterior chamber, iris is simple to check. You just have to check for color, if there is any color difference, if there is any heterochromia, if there is any outgrowth, if there is any pigmentation change. Overall architecture of iris will give you a better view. And then finally you have to look at the lens for opacification, placement of the lens, orientation of the lens, if there is any iris attachment. So this is what you have to look in lens. This is all just brief. You have to, in one swipe, you will be able to see. Now, the important aspect in slit lamp examination is magnification. I have seen a lot of people struggle to get a beautiful picture or to observe the structures. It is because they don't follow the magnification rule. So remember, for general eye examination, you have to use low magnification. If you have to focus on particular structure like cornea, you have to assess the layers of cornea. You have to advance your magnification to medium mode. And then if you have to in cornea, if you, in corneal layers, if you have to focus at one particular layer, then you have to increase the magnification to the maximum. So, and you have to follow the magnification pattern from low to high. It should never be that you're using in a high magnification and you'll never be able to come to a conclusive diagnosis if you go this way. Always low to high, low to high. So now, does magnification really matters? So what I'll just show you a small video for you to understand whether magnification plays an important role or no. If you look at this, initially it looks like it is a drought affected region, but on closer examination you will find out the picture is something else. See, remember, higher is the magnification, lower is the field of view. And this chapel remembers me of Mother's Day, which we recently had. I would like to wish everyone a very happy Mother's Day. So remember, in low magnification setting, what you have to check is you have to check lids, conjunctiva, sclera, cornea, general overview of your structures. You have to use low magnification. For medium magnification, it has to be specific to the layers, a fitting surface, and higher magnification. If there is any pathology, if there is any abnormality that you have found out, you can focus deeper and find out using higher magnification. Is it getting too much right now? If you believe, as a student, if you ask me, I would say this is getting too much right now. So let's take a quick recap as to what we have gone through the presentation so far. See, reasons to wear contact lens will come from history. It is an integral part of your contact lens workup, and you need to do a detailed history before you begin. Contact lens power will come from a very accurate refraction. If you have a good refraction, you will be able to finalize your contact lens prescription. Base curve, you will get it from your keratometry readings. HVID, your horizontal visible iris diameter, will decide your contact lens diameter. For a soft contact lens, by and large, we have to add plus 2 mm because it rests on the sclera. For RGP lens, we have to subtract minus 2 mm because it lies within the cornea. And a slit lamp examination will tell you the eye health status. Before you even fit a contact lens, you need to have a preliminary background of what the patient is, what your patient is all about. Once you have got all these inputs from your patient, once you have found out on paper, when you have documented everything, okay, these are the parameters which my patient has, this is the eye health status. So now you are more clear with your contact lens choosing options. So it becomes very easy for you to select a contact lens. So the next step that comes is insertion and removal. So I remember as a student in my diploma days, when I had to insert a lens, I would think of practical ways of inserting a lens. How could I insert a lens? I would an expert in marbles game, so I thought of using this, putting a lens as a marble and throwing it right into the patient's eye. But believe me, it ended up terribly. So I improvised myself, and then I went a step ahead. I asked my friend to hold open the eyelid, and then I'll throw the lens onto the cornea. Believe me, we had to literally run away from the clinic. The patient was so furious. And then we decided this is not a cup of tea. We looked up on Google Google Baba ki jai. And then after much research, this is the third image, this one, we came to know. And believe me guys, all these are incorrect methods. Even if you, a lot of people will say the third image is accurate, but let me tell you, look at the lower lid. The patient, the practitioner is applying too much of pressure on the patient's eye. It is not the right way to fit. You don't have to apply any kind of pressure. You just have to gently hold the lashes up and down and insert the contact lens in. So I hope you have got a good hang about how to insert and remove your contact lenses. No matter how good you are as a practitioner, there are certain type of people which we should avoid. Like in the initiation of this presentation, I said in the history taking, you need to be careful with their psychological aspect. So if you see a patient who comes to you and behave like this, don't fit them contact lenses. Straight away tell them to wear your spectacles. Spectacles will look good on such people. Believe me, these are the type of people which are your nightmares. And I wish you don't come across such people, at least in your early fitting days. Once you have got a hang of contact lens insertion and removal over a different population trend, you will be able to easily handle such kind of people. But if you are a beginner, avoid these kind of people. These are the some worst kind of patients for initial beginners. These are your actual nightmares. Okay, so now you have inserted the contact lens. The final thing is the assessment. Now there are certain things which you have to remember while assessing a contact lens. Centration, coverage, the movement, push-up test, lens lag. These are the important aspect of your assessment. So centration and coverage, it has to be good. Post-blink movement, there should be adequate post-blink movement to ensure that there is a sufficient tear exchange, there is an exchange of debris, and there is no pooling of tears in the central cornea. Lens lag, you have to measure in all four gazes. If once you have done with all these things, you have to assess visual acuity, and if need arise, you have to do an over refraction in small increments. Depending upon the above parameters, you will grade the fit as steep, flat, or ideal, and then final RX to be prescribed. We'll quickly see each of these in detail. So now centration. Centration is another important aspect of contact lens assessment. You have to ensure that there is no decentration, especially the lens edge hitting at the limbus cell, because you all are aware that limbus cell is the source of regeneration for epithelial cells. If there is an impact on limbal cells, it will lead to reduced visual acuity and neovascularization, which we don't want. Now, how do we document centration? Commonly used binasal system can be implied. It is basically, you might have done in your school mathematics. You need to draw four quadrants equidistant from each other, x-axis, y-axis, and then if there is a misdirection on the nasal side, it will be denoted in negative format. If there is a discentration on the temporal side, then we will notify it as plus. If it is superior, again it will be notified as plus. If the decentration is inferior, we will mark it as minus. Coverage. Coverage is another important aspect. If you have got good centration, definitely you will get good coverage. So look at this image. This is a very good centered and with optimum coverage. Look at the lens edge outside the limbus. It is equidistant at all points. So this is what we want when we are looking at coverage. And when you have good coverage, by default you will get good centration as well. So the idea of centration is to ensure that the optics of your lens coincides with your pupillary center. So once you are done with centration and coverage, you have to next check the movements, post blink movement. So just look at the post-blink movement. The lens should move and come back to its original position after each blink to ensure there is sufficient air exchange and exchange of cell debris. If that does not happen, it will lead to complications. After movement, you need to go for push-ups. So it is just like your regular push-ups. So what you have to do is just hold the lower edge and gently push the lens. Now this is an ideal fit consideration. The moment you apply pressure, the lens gets displaced and comes back to its original position. We'll just quickly look at a steep lens fitting. Now see the amount of pressure the practitioner is applying. Lens is not moving a bit and it is not coming back to its original position. The lens is too tight, and if it is flat, it will move a lot. Slide pressure and it will move. So lens lag is another important aspect of your contact lens assessment.
So here we have a slit lamp here with the lens in place. So when you get the patient to blink, I'm just going to do the post-blink movement from the primary position. Also in the primary position, you want to look at the lens centration. You want to make sure the lens is centered, and also going to look at coverage, which is making sure it's covering the entire corner. And now we're going to get the patient to look to the right, and we're just going to have the lens lag. And this is how much the lens is horizontally, and the patient looks from left to right. So ideally, this should be between 0.2 and 0.1 millimeters. However, if you are unsure, you can consult the manufacturer's specifications, the lens that you're fitting, and this should give you an indication of how much it should be. To get the patient to look up, to look down.
So lens lag has to be measured in all the 4 quadrants. You have to ask the patient to look left, right, up and down and see. Expected movement over here would be somewhere around 0.10 to 0.20. When you ask the patient to look down, you have to lift the lid and ensure that the lens is well centered. Okay, so once you are done with the lens lag, so this is a brief outcome of how to judge a fit type. Visual acuity, if the lens is steeper, visual acuity will be better post blink. Centration coverage would be good in a steep fitting lens. Push-up test, generally it would be more than 60%. As we have seen in the previous video, the practitioner was applying too much of pressure from the thumb, but still the lens was not moving. So that was a steep lens. Lens lag, it would be very minimal, or there would be no lag as the lens is not moving at all. So very minimal movement, no movement indicates it is a steep fitting lens. In flat, it would be opposite to what we see in steep fitting lens. Visual acuity would be worse post blink. The lens will move a lot, it would be decentered, you will get neovascularization, you will get inflammations, the coverage would be very poor, the patient will complain of halos and glares. Push-up test, it would be somewhere between 0 to 40%. Lens lag would be more as the movement is more. In an ideal case, there should be no change in visual acuity post and pre-blink. Centration and coverage has to be very good. Push-up test should lie between 40 to 60%, and lens lag somewhere around 0.10 to 0.25 mm. Now you have to understand push-up test. It is a subjective test and it varies from practitioner to practitioner. So over a period of time, you will develop this skill as to how much is 40%. Your 40% may not be same as that of other, but over a period of time, you will get a good hang of it. And push-up test is really a very good test to understand the nature of the fit. Once you have understood your fit type, you will move on to over refraction. You will quickly check visual acuity. If it is less than best corrected visual acuity, you will have to do an over refraction using your retinoscopy or an auto refractometer, which will give you a brief idea as to what is the optical status of the eye. So while you are over refracting, you have to ensure that you do it in plus minus 0.25 step. You should not use half diopter or 1 diopter. You have to go in small increments. Now suppose if you have fitted a contact lens with -4, and on over refraction you're getting plus half. So what would be your final Rx? Your final Rx would be -4 plus 0.25. You have to add your over refraction value in your contact lens, what you have fitted in the eye. So if you take the example of -4 with an over refraction of plus 0.25, the final prescription would be -3.75 diopters. Once you are done with the over refraction, you have to place the final order. You have everything with you now. This is important. Place, you need to have soft skill and you need to build relationship with different vendors if you have to be a successful contact lens practitioner. So how you have to begin placing your order, you have to greet the person who receives your call, and then you have to give your short introduction. For example, you can say, "Good afternoon, sir. This is Hamza Qureshi calling from Aditya Jyot." So they have your detail, your name, and your workplace from where you're calling the company. And then the operator will tell you, okay, what is your requirement? Then you can describe your parameters, your base curve, your back vertex power, your diameter, what product you're looking at. Once you have placed this, once the operator has noted your order, you have to ask for an order reference number. It is very important to note down the order reference number and name of the attendant who has picked your call. Once that is given, you ask for expected delivery and make a note of it so that you can follow up with your patient accordingly. And if there is any special remark that you need to mention, like if you need a recent manufacturing date, or if you want delivery instructions such as that it has to be delivered to the next store or at your home, then you can place this request and vendors will be more than happy to comply with this. Once you have placed your order and you have received your contact lenses, so what thing you should do at dispensing visit? So you have to explain contact lens care regimen to your patient. You have to provide information. And then you have to practice insertion and removal techniques. Information on adaptation. How much time will it take? If you're switching a patient from hydrogel to silicone hydrogel, you have to pre-inform your patient that you can expect limbal redness, you can expect minimal redness in your eye for over a couple of days. It can take somewhere from 15 seconds to a minute to a year. Sorry, it can take from 15 seconds to a month for a hydrogel lens user to get adapted to a silicone hydrogel lens. So this is what you have to pre-inform everything so that patient should not catch hold of you of anything. Once you have given information on adaptation, make sure that you aware them on possible signs of complication. If possible, take a detailed consent, get it signed by them, which explains all the possible expectations they should have with contact lens usage. The important aspect is you need to educate them on hygiene and compliance. And also you have to inform them when they should see you next. Aftercare visit schedule is a must. And before their departure, provide a summary, a small leaflet highlighting key points. Now you have to understand care and maintenance is a continuous process. Patient education and instruction is a continuous process. So you have to reassure, you have to reinforce care and maintenance on each and every visit. Contact lens care regimen suitable for your patient, how they are doing. The important aspect in care and maintenance is age and gender. For a young patient, uh, demonstration won't be sufficient, but for an elderly, you need to give handouts. And gender, if it is a female user, you need to highlight the use of cosmetics in contact lenses. With male, we don't generally have this kind of problem. Also, you need to consider the occupational and visual demands of the patient, environmental exposure, temporary conditions like diabetes, arthritis. If there is any underlying pathology, you have to understand that. If there is any active infection in the eye, so first you should ask them to discontinue contact lenses and first get it treated. Once the primary infection is resolved, you can start with contact lens wear. And the most important aspect is cradle. that is clean, rinse and disinfect lenses every time. Yeah, you have to remember this is a continuous process, and on each visit you have to repeat these things. The more you say, the more it gets registered in patient's eye. I'll give you a small example over here. Now, if I ask you a question, what is the shape of Earth? You would say it is round. What kind of a question is this? See, you have not seen Earth, but still you can say it is round. Why do you say it is round? Because right from your childhood up to now, you have been hearing and you have been reading that Earth is round, Earth is round. So by default, automatically it comes to your tongue that the Earth shape of the Earth is round. Similarly, you have to reinforce and reinforce your care and maintenance guidelines to your patient. The more you speak about, the more you explain it to your patient, the better a care regimen will be followed by your patient. And the better the care regimen is, the better is the success rate. So once you are done with your care and maintenance, the next important aspect is follow-ups. So what I generally follow is I generally do a telephonic call after first visit. Supposing if I fitted a patient with contact lenses today, tomorrow morning I'll just give them a call and ask them how are they doing with their contact lenses. If there is any problem, they can come back to me without any kind of hesitation. You need to have good rapport. You need to consider them as a family, and you need to keep calling them again and again. And then for a clinical visit, I generally call after a week to understand whether they are following what I have told them, what I have taught them. And as per modality, you can call after a week. Every 6 months is must for contact lens examination in case they develop some kind of pathology to rule out possible underlying causes. You must call your contact lens patient on a 6 monthly basis. Now, building relationship is an important and integral part of contact lens. What you have to do is, what you can do is customize festival greetings through SMS. Whenever you're giving festival greetings, you have to ensure you don't mention your offers, discounts. It looks very bad. So just keep a simple greeting with their name on it. This can be done through bulk SMS program, and then repeated reminders and alerts if they are due to renew their contact lenses, or if there is a seasonal allergy going on, or if in rainy season what precautions you have to do. So you have to remind them, and using alerts you can push your practice also using promotional codes. So once you have done this, I'll just quickly take a couple of your minutes and share a story. So I was sitting in my clinic, and a 23-year-old female happened to visit our clinic. She was not a regular patient. In fact, she never came to our clinic. That was her first visit. She would generally go opposite, and she had a very high prescription. The reason she had come to us was she was not a contact lens user. She had broken her spectacles, and she had a convocation to attend, and she was visibly visibly very upset because she could not see with such a high prescription. Her examination, it was lunchtime, so all the staff were occupied, so I took over the counter, and when I saw her and I attended to her, I saw the hinge was broken and it required welding, which was not possible immediately. So I explained them this is the problem, and now mother and daughter both were visibly very anguished. They were frightened as to what they'll do and how would the convocation go. So I said, okay, I'll give you a small solution. I took them inside the clinic area, did an initial assessment. I had a soft trial lens of -12. So I fitted her with the contact lens, and believe me, you should have seen her face. She was so happy and excited. She was moving around the clinic, and the first thing she did was she was looking in her mirror and looking at herself. And then in excitement, she said to her mother, Mom, I can see everything. It's so wonderful. And then she realized she's in front of me in a clinic. She came back to her senses. And then the mother was worried as to I charge them heavily. She asked me what would be the charges for this lens. I said, ma'am, it is free. I'm doing it out of courtesy. I'm helping you out. So what I told them is you go attend your convocation, come back in the evening. Meanwhile, I'll try to get your spectacle fixed. You can give back your contact lens and then you can take your spectacles and go. So in the evening visit, what happened is I was expecting this. The girl and mother, they both came in, they took the spectacles, I removed the lenses, and then we started talking about contact lenses. That is what we want, and that is how you get more patients. So I made her understand her condition, I made her understand the nature of her refraction, and then she agreed to me. And finally, I fitted her with an RGP lens, and till date she is my patient. So this is what how you have to approach. I'll share another one story of an optometrist, my senior. She is a good contact lens fitter, but she was very worried about poking the lenses in her eye. I don't know what hesitation she had. She came to me, I talked to her, I counseled her and fitted her with a trial lens, and look at her smile. So this is what we have to do. We just have to be kind, we have to be accommodating, we have to speak, and we have to be considerate while dealing with our patients. And finally, I'll share this slide with you. They both are first timers. The student, she is one of my students, Sejal Varange. So she fitted the patient for the first time, and the patient has worn the lenses for the first time. So look at the smile, how happy they are with the contact lens experience. Believe me guys, if you follow the recommended guidelines, if you do a decent job, the patient will remember you forever and it gives you immense satisfaction of fitting. So to sum it up, I'll say the entire process is all about understanding the need of the patient and incorporating right feature of the product to give maximum benefit to your patient. You need to keep this. If your patient gets benefited, they are not going to go anywhere. And if the feature meets the need of your patient, they will forever be indebted to you. With this, I would conclude my talk, and I'm sorry if there is any technical glitch, if there is any audio lag or video lag, uh, and if there is any question, the host can put up the questions.
Thank you for the presentation, sir. That was a lovely presentation that you've shared. So shall we move to the discussion, sir?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Yes, so the first question that we've received is, what is the best option of contact lens to give the patient with dry eyes?
Okay, so like we have been discussing, you need to have a detailed history. So there is no best option for contact lenses. What you all contact lenses are best. You need to do a detailed workup of your patient, note down all the parameters, and then evaluate. On the basis of your evaluation, you have to see what are the available products that fit best in the patient category, considering your requirement, and then accordingly you have to choose. When you're talking about dry eyes, I would say modern day silicone hydrogel lenses, they are definitely better. So you can consider any modern silicone hydrogel lenses. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, sir. And what about the modality? Is the daily disposable the best option for the dry eyes?
Again, for the modality, I would say you have to understand the need of the patient. If a patient is an occasional wearer, you can consider giving a daily disposable. And if the patient is a regular wearer, so you'll have to assess the level of dry eye. See, you have to understand there are two things. One is dry eye symptom, and the other is dry eye disease. They both are very different. If you are continuously staring at your mobile screen, or forget about your mobile screen, if you're continuously holding up both your lids, you will feel dry eye. So that is a symptom, dry eye symptom. It is not an indication that the patient is having a dry eye disease. If there is a dry eye disease, definitely daily disposables will be better. Remember, fresher is always better. The more frequent you replace the lens, the better it is. But then you'll have to consider your patient, you have to consider it as a family, and then looking at the overall picture, you will be able to better decide the modality, whether you have to give it as a daily disposable, or the other option is you can consider a monthly disposable as a 15-day disposable. You can ask the patient to replace the lens in every 15 day or every week, depending upon the situation and underlying pathology of your patient. I hope this answers your question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the answer. So similarly, the other question we've received is the soft contact lenses contraindicated in the cases of allergic vernal keratoconjunctivitis? And if not, then can we use anti-allergic eye drops along with the soft contact lens while wearing the soft contact lenses?
Okay, so if there is any allergy, remember the golden rule. First, you have to treat the underlying pathology. Allergy will go away with your anti-allergic drops. So discontinue the contact lens wear, ask them to use drop. Once the pathology has gone, then they can restart with the contact lens wear. I hope this answers it.
Thank you, sir. Similarly, the other question we've received is DK by T. If DK by T is 125 or more, then what do we understand in layman language? How do we explain this to the patient?
Okay, this is an important question. A lot of manufacturers, when you start your practice or when you're in practice, a lot of manufacturers come and they say, my DK by T is 150, my DK by T is 200. So you have to understand the basic requirement. That is why I have been emphasizing on the basic aspect. So if I ask you what is the oxygen requirement of a patient sitting in Mumbai, so how would you decide that? We have Holden and Mertz criteria, we have Harbit and Bonanno criteria, so which says for an extended use, if a contact lens has DK by T of 135 can be used, and Harbit and Bonanno says that, and for a daily wear it has to be 35. So if any contact lens which meets this requirement, you can definitely go ahead and fit. So it is not that if the DK by T value is higher, it is better. So this is a misconception and a myth that is going around. So don't fall for that. That is why I say you have to learn, you have to understand your basics well. Once you are clear with your fundamentals, no matter how challenging the case is, you will be able to solve it very quickly. So for patient consideration, you need to explain them. You can give them a small example. If they wear wedding rings, everybody wears ring. If the patient is wearing a ring, you can tell them, if you wear a ring for a long time, you get ring marks. Why does that happen? Because sufficient oxygen is not passing to that area. That is why you have got ring mark. So if you remove it, and then couple of days, the ring mark disappears because again the oxygen requirement is fulfilled. So that is what one example you can give to your patient. I hope this answers it.
Thank you, sir. I hope this answers your question, Mr. Gulab Singh. So similarly, the other question we've received is how do you deal with the patients who complain that they feel uncomfortable with the lenses on in the cool places? For example, when the person makes the transition into the room with the AC, so they start feeling uncomfortable with the contact lenses on. So how do we explain this to the patient?
Okay, so when you are doing the pre-workup of your patient, you need to make sure you need to list them possible when you are giving care and maintenance handout. You have to mention this point that what are the possible places where you can use your contact lenses and you cannot. So if a patient is sitting in front of an AC blower, definitely with the wind pressure, with the air pressure, the lenses will feel more drier. So you have to tell them to position themselves in such a way that they're not facing, their eyes are not facing the blower directly. That could be a possible reason why they feel uncomfortable. So the other reason is like we said in the question, you can ask them to blink constantly if they're in an air-conditioned environment. So the simple way to deal with this problem is just to ask them not to sit directly in facing the fan or the blower of the AC. I hope it answers it.
Thank you for the answer, sir. Similarly, in the allergic conjunctivitis conditions, for the patients with the chronic condition of allergic conjunctivitis that will not disappear, so do we prescribe contact lenses for that patient or is it contraindicated?
Okay, so for allergic conjunctivitis, it keeps reoccurring. I do agree with that aspect, but then we have different types of contact lenses available. You can consider a scleral lens. You can consider a large dia lens, and then You can advise the patient if the allergy triggers, you discontinue the lens, put on the drop. Once the symptoms subside, you can switch back to contact lenses.
So are normal
I hope it
soft
answers.
contact lenses contraindicated, sir, in allergic conjunctivitis cases? We do not prescribe them.
If it is a chronic case and if it is a reoccurring allergic conjunctivitis, I would personally advise a daily disposable or I would consider a scleral lens. But
And so, sir,
by and
similar.
large, you have to avoid with allergies.
Okay. Um, Thank you, sir. So, similarly, another question from Evo Technology. So, patients having binocular vision anomalies along with refractive errors. So, how do we manage them with the contact lens?
Okay, so you have to understand if there is any underlying binocular vision anomaly. First, you have to treat that. You have to prescribe vision therapy and then move ahead with contact lenses. So you have done your binocular vision workup, you have got a detailed picture as to what is the status of the eye. Generally, what happens is the convergence and the accommodative part comes in play. So you have to ensure that is well taken care and then you can prescribe the contact lens. If there is a problem with convergence and accommodation, definitely the patient will come back to you complaining of varying visual acuity. It may be blurry, it may be good at times, and it may be blurry at times. So you need to first correct the binocular vision pathology and then move on with contact lens. And if you can, and if you're confident that with your contact lens prescription, the binocular vision problem will be taken care of, then you can take a simultaneous approach. I hope it answers it.
Thank you for the answer, sir. Thank you for the answer. So we wrapped up with our questions. Now, on behalf of IBIDS and our audience, we would like to thank you very much for your valuable time and the lovely experience and the knowledge that you have imparted on us today. So I just request you to share your experience with IBIDS today.
Well, it was a wonderful, first of all, like I have said in my second slide, I'm really very thankful to iBids and for Optum team for putting up such a wonderful platform to learn. And I would say this is my first of a webinar, uh, and I do learn a lot with this. And I wish all the best to iBid team. Keep inspiring us, keep motivating students, and keep motivating speakers to come up and talk. And if there is anything you need from me in future also, I'm available.
Thank you for your kind words, sir. It means a lot for us, and as usual, it was great. The presentation was great, and we all learned something valuable today. And it was an honor to have you here. So that brings us to the end of the program today. I would also like to thank our audience for being very supportive, kind, attentive, as well as interactive. So on that note, I would like to end the meeting. This session will be on YouTube soon. Stay tuned for more sessions and programs by IBIDS and For Optum. You can also visit us at www.foroptum.com for more information on For Optum and IBIDS. Also, join us on WhatsApp, Facebook, and Instagram. Have a great day. Thank you.